Now when it comes to Cardi B and Latto, the lid just got blown off this entire situation, and I mean fully blown off, because everything we have been whispering about, everything that has been simmering quietly behind closed doors, behind locked text threads, behind subliminal lyrics and side-eye interviews, has finally bubbled up to the surface for the whole world to witness. We have officially reached the moment where every rumor, every theory, every little crumb the internet was holding on to gets stamped, confirmed, and locked in, and the entire narrative around these two suddenly snaps into focus like a picture you have been squinting at for months and can now read with perfect clarity. The story you thought you knew is about to look very, very different. The villain you thought existed may not be the villain at all. The friendship you thought was real may have been a stage play with one actor still believing it was the real show. And if you are ready to step inside the most layered, most psychological, most quietly devastating fallout in female rap this year, because trust me, this is no longer a beef, this is a case study in betrayal, then buckle up, because what just happened on the Breakfast Club this morning rewrote everything we thought we understood about Cardi, about Latto, about Big Mama, and about what really happens when two women who once called each other sister sit on opposite sides of an invisible courtroom that the entire culture is watching. So before we dig into the cinematic detail of how Cardi B responded within literal hours, before we break down the lyric that has the whole industry whispering, and before we tear apart the body language, the word choice, and the very surgical way Latto carved her message into wax, do me one small favor and tap that like button, smash that subscribe, hit that little bell so you do not miss a thing, because every single time you like, comment, and subscribe, another industry secret cracks open. Another fake friendship gets exposed, and we all get one step closer to the truth behind the curtain. The deeper we go into this story, the more obvious it becomes that this is not just two women trading bars, this is two women trading scars, and the receipts are about to be spread across the floor in HD detail. Because what is unfolding right now is not the kind of celebrity drama that fades by the weekend, this is the kind of moment that gets quoted in podcasts 5 years from now, the kind of moment that ends up in textbook chapters about how the industry actually treats women who dare to speak their truth out loud. Now if you have somehow been living under a rock and missed the first chapter of this entire saga, let me give you the quick rewind, because you need the full picture to feel the full weight. Months back, Cardi B was knee-deep in another situation with Ice Spice, and the temperature was sky-high. Cardi was not in a calm headspace, she was not in a controlled headspace, she was in full Mama Bear, full Bronx Street Code, full I want my hands on this girl tonight energy. She picked up the phone, she went on a tear, she started broadcasting her location plans like a search party, and somewhere in the middle of that pressure cooker rant, the name that fell out of her mouth was not Ice Spice, it was Latto. And not in a kind way. Not in a polite, sisterly, oh I love that girl way. It was sharp, it was condescending, it was dismissive, and most importantly, it was loud. The exact phrasing, you have probably already heard it looped across every timeline by now, the sit yo so and so down, you do not know, I am gonna show, I am not Latto, I will beat her so and so up, you think I am no and no, all of that, screamed at full lung capacity, captured on a recording, and eventually unleashed onto the internet where it could never be put back in the bottle. And the moment that audio escaped containment, Cardi B, to her credit, did not pretend it never happened. She hopped on X, she fired off a public apology, she offered to buy Latto a bag, the international, universal, hip-hop dialect for I messed up and I am trying to make amends in the most expensive language I speak. But here is where the first crack in the story shows up, because Latto did not bite. Latto did not accept the bag. Latto did not post a heart emoji and pretend the tape did not exist. Latto went quiet. Cold, surgical quiet. The kind of quiet that anybody who has ever been crossed by somebody they loved knows is the loudest sound in the world. That quiet was not forgiveness. That quiet was a fuse, slowly burning down towards something the public could not see coming yet. And while everybody else moved on to the next news cycle, Latto, in her own way, was sharpening a verse. Fast forward to right now, the album finally lands, the project is titled Big Mama, and tucked inside that body of work is a track called Gimme That, and on that track is a sequence of bars so precise, so coldly designed, that the second the streaming platforms went live, the entire internet collectively realized this was not a coincidence. This was a chapter. This was a response. This was a woman who had been silently building a case file in her closet and chose the platform of her own album to read it aloud. The line that has every single comment section on fire goes something like this in spirit. She talks about already having a luxury closet that looks like an entire designer flagship. She mocks the idea that anybody needs to gift her a handbag when she has been pulling those off racks her entire run. She stacks the financial flex on top of the emotional flex. And then she closes it out by daring the other party to step in a booth so she can call up her own producer and end the conversation. Through speakers instead of through a phone call. It is layered. It is petty in the most professional way petty can be. It is the kind of writing that reads like a courtroom statement disguised as a chorus. And once Latto sat across from the Breakfast Club table this morning, she did not even flinch when the question came. Yes, that was about Cardi. 3 words. Confirmation locked. But here is the part the casual viewer is going to miss, and here is where the entire psychology of this situation cracks wide open. Because Latto did not just confirm the lyric, she explained the why behind the cold. She said, "Look, I am pregnant right now, my emotions are sitting at the top of my chest every single day, and when I scrolled through the internet and watched myself get dragged, get labeled, get insulted by name, it did not hit me like industry gossip. It hit me like a friend stabbed me in the kitchen. Because I was not just some random rapper in Cardi's contacts, we were on a texting basis. We were on a we got each other's numbers basis. We were on a if something is bothering you, pick up the phone and call me before you broadcast it to a third-party basis." And that is the entire fracture point right there. Latto is not mad about the words. Latto is mad about the channel the words came through. Cardi did not call her. Cardi did not text her. Cardi went into a heated room full of other ears and let a real friend's name fly out of her mouth as collateral damage in somebody else's war. Now think about that for a second, because this is where the storytelling around this beef has to slow down and let you feel it. There is a very specific category of pain that only happens when you find out you were never as protected as you thought you were inside somebody's circle. It is not the insult itself, the insult is almost the wrapping paper. It is the realization that when you were not in the room, you were the joke. When you were not on the call, your name became a weapon somebody else picked up and used. Latto put it plain, she said 2 months later Cardi finally reached out personally, but by then the bullet had already passed through. By then she had already mentally moved on. By then the friendship in her head was already filed under a different cabinet, the cabinet labeled people I thought I knew. And that is the cabinet you do not move back out of easily, that is the cabinet where careers worth of receipts get stored permanently. The host asked her, "Would you ever sit down and have that conversation, would you take that meeting, would you be open to reconciliation?" And Latto, ever the diplomat, said yeah, I am open, I am not closed, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. That sentence right there, "it left a bad taste in my mouth," is the entire thesis statement of this beef. That is the line you need to write down. That is the line that tells you exactly where the temperature is right now between these two women. And here is where the timeline gets surgical, because Cardi B did not let the dust settle for even a full afternoon. Within hours, and I mean hours, of that Breakfast Club interview reaching the timelines, Cardi was already at her keyboard, already drafting a paragraph, already publishing what is honestly one of the most articulate, most self-aware celebrity statements we have seen this year. She did not deflect. She did not turn it back on Latto. She did not pull out the "I was misquoted" card or the audio was tampered with card. She said, "I truly understand how you feel, and that is exactly why I chose to apologize publicly, because the disrespect itself was public." She said, "On that call, I did not even mean to call you that, there was no intention to harm you, there is a difference between what came out of my mouth and what was actually moving through my head." She said, "What I should have said was that you had been too forgiving, you had given too much grace in a situation that did not deserve it, but the conversation was heated and I let my mouth get ahead of my brain." And then she added the most human line in the entire statement, "When that call leaked, I was 8 months pregnant, I had just dropped an album, I was drowning in everything at once, and that is not an excuse, that is just context for where my head was standing at that moment." Then Cardi went deeper, and this is where you can tell she has been holding this internally for a while. She said, "I genuinely felt awful about what happened, I made multiple attempts to reach you, I talked to your manager, I talked to your sister, I even text messaged you directly, I am taking full responsibility, I have always had love and respect for you, I always wanted to make this right, but making it right looks different for each of us. I wanted to reconnect privately, you wanted to address it on your album." That last sentence is the most loaded sentence in the entire apology, because it does something very specific. It acknowledges Latto's right to handle it her way without telling her she handled it wrong. That is not a clapback. That is not a subtle shade. That is a grown woman saying you took a different road than I did, and I respect that the road is yours to take. And if you have been paying attention to celebrity apologies in this era, you know how rare that level of accountability actually is. Most apologies these days are dressed-up performances with a hidden agenda baked into the third paragraph. Cardi's letter, on its face, did not read like that. It read like somebody who has had 8 months of replaying that phone call in her head and finally decided to say the part she should have said the day it happened. Now if you let your eyes drift across the comment sections right now, what you will notice is that the public is sliced almost perfectly down the middle, and that split itself is telling us a deeper story about how the culture views female friendship inside the industry. On one side of the room, you have the camp that is saying, look, Latto is fully justified, she is allowed to feel however she wants to feel, she is allowed to address it however she chooses to address it, nobody gets to set a timer on when she has to forgive somebody who insulted her in public. On the other side of the room, you have the camp that is saying, but Cardi apologized, multiple times, on multiple platforms, with her full chest, and at some point the door has to crack open even if it does not swing all the way wide. And the truth, the actual truth, is that both rooms are correct. Both feelings can sit at the same dinner table without canceling each other out. Latto does not owe Cardi a reconciliation. Cardi does not owe Latto silence. This is the messy, complicated, very adult zone where most public feuds eventually live, and most celebrities never have the emotional vocabulary to navigate it. These two, whether you support one over the other or not, are at least giving us a real example of how this kind of fracture sounds when it happens between people who actually had a relationship to lose. And here is where I want to slow down and just sit with you for a second, because I want to talk about the deeper rule of friendship that nobody on the timeline seems to be acknowledging. If you say something disrespectful about somebody behind their back, and that somebody finds out about it, you do not get to dictate how they respond to it. You do not get to control the timing of their reaction. You do not get to script the emotional schedule of their healing. You did the original action. The reaction belongs to them. That is the unspoken contract of every real friendship that has ever existed. And the line a lot of celebrities keep crossing, the line a lot of regular people in regular lives keep crossing, is the assumption that an apology automatically obligates the other person to perform forgiveness on demand. It does not work like that. It has never worked like that. Apologizing closes one door for you, it does not open another door for them. And once you understand that, the entire Cardi and Latto situation reads very differently, because Latto is not being petty by writing that verse, Latto is just refusing to perform a forgiveness that has not actually arrived inside her body yet. And honestly, the saddest piece of this whole thing, the piece I keep getting stuck on, is that Cardi B and Latto had genuine on-screen chemistry. They had genuine off-screen chemistry. They were the kind of pairing the culture had been quietly rooting for, two women, two different lanes, two different aesthetics, but enough mutual respect that you could see a long-term collaborative future stretching out in front of them. There was a version of this timeline where they were sitting on each other's albums, popping up at each other's listening parties, defending each other on the timeline when other rappers tried to start something. That version of the timeline still might come back. But right now, in this current chapter, the door is closed, and you can hear the click of that lock from across the room. Because even though Cardi just sat down and addressed it again and said all the right things, the fact remains, she still said the original thing. She still screamed it. She still let it hang in the air long enough to be recorded, leaked, and looped. And then on top of that, before the leak ever happened, she allegedly reached out to Latto for a feature on a song, sat in the same creative space, broke the same bread, and never once mentioned that her name had been used in a previous tirade. That is the fracture inside the fracture. That is the wound underneath the wound. Because the words alone, painful as they are survivable. The silence about the words is what is unsurvivable. Think about it from Latto's chair. You log into the studio, you give your verse, you give your time, you give your energy, you walk out feeling like that was a beautiful day with a sister in the game, and then weeks later you find out that same sister, in a separate room, with a separate audience, said something about you that she never had the courage to bring to your face. Now every memory of that studio session gets repainted in a new color. Now every text exchange before that day gets reread with suspicious eyes. Now you are not just processing an insult, you are processing the discovery that you were operating on incomplete information inside a relationship you thought was honest. That is not a quick wound. That is a wound that needs years, not months. And anybody asking why Latto did not just hash it out privately the second the audio dropped is missing the basic emotional physics here. You cannot have a private conversation about a public wound. The whole architecture of the disrespect was public, so the architecture of the response, by emotional symmetry, almost has to be public too. But let me also be very clear, because I do not want anybody walking away from this thinking this is a Cardi B drag session, it absolutely is not. Cardi B is, in many ways, the gold standard example of how a celebrity should handle being caught in their own mess. She did not run. She did not lawyer up. She did not delete the tweets and hope the algorithm forgot. She came out, full chest, full name, full pen, and said yes, I did that, yes, I should not have done that, yes, I have been trying to fix it. That is humility. That is accountability. That is naming the specific thing she should have said versus the specific thing she actually said. That is leaving the door open without forcing anybody to walk through it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what an apology is supposed to look like in 2026. Most of the celebrities apologizing in your timeline this year were apologizing to save a brand deal. Cardi was apologizing to save a relationship. And whether or not the relationship survives, the apology itself was clean. The apology itself was real. The apology itself was Libra energy at its finest, and as somebody who has Libra in their circle, I can tell you that Libras genuinely do not enjoy carrying an unresolved conflict in their chest, it physically rearranges their nervous system. So when you put all those layers next to each other, the call, the leak, the public apology, the rejected bag, the silent 2 months, the studio session, the album, the Big Mama lyric, the Breakfast Club confirmation, the same-day response, the public letter, the open door, the closed lock, what you are actually looking at is one of the most fully documented, fully linear, fully traceable celebrity fallouts of this entire era. There is no he said she said inside this story, every single beat has been captured, time-stamped, recorded, and laid out for the public like evidence inside an exhibit. And that is part of what makes this so fascinating to dissect, because most beefs in hip-hop come with missing chapters, missing audio, missing context. This one comes with the receipts already organized for you, all you have to do is read them in order and you get the whole movie. Now let us talk about what happens next, because the next chapter is already being written, even if neither one of these women is at the keyboard for it yet. The whispers across the industry right now suggest that Cardi B is back in the booth, that her album is targeted for the end of this year, and that there is at least a possibility that Latto's name, or at least Latto's situation, comes up in some form on that body of work. Now, the rumor mill is loud right now, the rumor mill is saying Cardi is going to clap back, Cardi is going to take her own shots, Cardi is going to come out swinging on wax the same way Latto did. I am here to tell you, with full confidence, that I do not believe that is the direction Cardi is going to take. Because every single piece of public communication Cardi has put out in the last 48 hours has pointed in the opposite direction. Cardi is not in the headspace of clapping back. Cardi is in the headspace of softening her position. Cardi, I think, is going to address this situation on her album, but in a vulnerable register, not a combative one. I think there might be a verse, maybe even an entire song, where she leans into the regret, where she leans into the emotional accountability, where she basically does in melody what she just did in that public letter. And if she pulls that off, if she actually delivers a song that is half apology and half confession, the cultural impact of that record could be massive. It could be the kind of record that wins the public back in a way no statement ever could. Now flip the camera the other way, because Latto is also in a very interesting strategic position right now. She just dropped a body of work titled Big Mama, she just took the most precise jab of her entire career, she just sat across from the Breakfast Club and said yes, that was on purpose, yes, that was about who you think it was about, and she did it all while pregnant, which by the way, only adds to the cinematic weight of the moment. Latto is essentially writing the boss chapter of her own discography in real time. And whether or not she ever reconciles with Cardi, the artistic statement she just made is going to age very well. Years from now, when journalists are going back through the timeline of how women in rap finally started defending themselves publicly without apologizing for the defense, the Big Mama era is going to be cited as a turning point. That is not me overhyping it, that is me reading the room the same way the rest of the industry is reading it. Now if you really want to zoom out on this thing, and I mean really zoom all the way out, you have to understand that this is bigger than these two women, this is bigger than this album cycle, this is bigger than one phone call. This is a public conversation about how female friendships inside the industry get tested, get strained, and sometimes get broken, in ways that male friendships in the same industry never get scrutinized for. When two male rappers fall out, the culture treats it like cinema, the culture writes essays about it, the culture turns it into folklore. When two female rappers fall out, the culture treats it like a catfight and tries to rush both parties back to neutral. Latto and Cardi are, whether they intended to or not, pushing back against that double standard simply by handling this in a way that refuses to be neutered. Latto is allowed to be cold. Cardi is allowed to be apologetic. Both of them are allowed to take up the exact amount of space their feelings actually require. And the more they keep doing that, the more they are quietly rewriting the playbook for how female artists are allowed to feud, recover, or not recover, in public. And while we are zooming out, let me also point out something the timeline is barely noticing right now, which is that this entire situation is also a quiet, brutal lesson in how industry friendships function in the first place. Because there is a fan-favorite theory floating around comment sections this week that Cardi and Latto were not really real friends, that they were industry friends, that they were two women who shook hands at the same award shows and texted on holidays and supported each other publicly because the optics required it. I do not fully agree with that theory, because the level of pain Latto is showing right now is not the level of pain you show over an industry acquaintance, that is the level of pain you show over somebody you actually trusted. But there is a kernel of truth in there too, which is that a lot of celebrity friendships exist in this strange middle zone where the closeness is genuine but the protections are limited. You can love somebody and still let their name fly out of your mouth in a moment you should not have. You can respect somebody and still talk past them when you should have talked to them. And those two truths can live inside the same friendship, and they often do, until one moment forces a reckoning, and then everything you thought you knew about the friendship gets reorganized in a single afternoon. So now we sit here, all of us, the fans, the spectators, the timeline, the industry, the podcasters, the bloggers, the casual listeners, the diehards, and we wait. We wait to see whether Latto ever opens that door. We wait to see whether Cardi keeps tapping on it gently or eventually stops tapping at all. We wait to see whether the next album cycle from either one of these women adds another layer to this story or quietly closes the chapter. And honestly, the suspense of not knowing is itself part of the appeal of this whole moment. Because most public situations resolve too neatly, most public situations get wrapped up in a brand deal photo op or a fake hug at an awards show. This one is refusing to do that. This one is refusing to be small. This one is sitting in the discomfort, on both sides, and that is exactly what makes it real. Discomfort is the receipt of authenticity. If the apology was fake, Cardi would have moved on already. If the wound was small, Latto would have already forgiven it. The fact that we are still here, weeks deep, is the proof of how much this actually meant to both of them. And honestly, I want to say one more thing on the bigger lesson of all this before we close out, because I do not want this to land as just gossip. I want this to land as something you can actually carry into your own life. If you have ever said something about a friend that you should not have said, please, please, do not let them hear it from somebody else. Beat the leak. Beat the gossip pipeline. Beat the third party. Walk into the room yourself and say, hey, I had a moment, I let something slip, I need you to hear it from me before you hear it from anybody else, and I am sorry. That single move, that single act of self-snitching for the sake of the relationship, can save friendships that would otherwise dissolve into ash. Because what kills relationships is rarely the original mistake, what kills relationships is the silence after the original mistake. Cardi made the original mistake. Cardi is not getting flamed for the mistake. Cardi is getting flamed for the gap between the mistake and the conversation that should have happened immediately after. Latto is not mad about the screaming on the phone. Latto is mad about the months of silence that followed it. And if there is one takeaway, one single, sit with it for a second takeaway, from this entire situation, it is that. Tell on yourself. Tell on yourself fast. Tell on yourself before anybody else gets the chance to tell on you. Because that is the difference between a wound that heals and a wound that scars. Now before we wrap, I want to take you inside one more layer of this, because the more I sit with Cardi's apology letter, the more I notice something the casual reader is going to skip right past. Look at the structure of that letter again, really look at it, almost forensically, almost the way a writing professor would mark up a student essay, and you will see that every single sentence she put on that page is doing a specific emotional job. The opening line acknowledges the other person's feelings, that is empathy. The next line takes ownership of the public nature of the disrespect, that is accountability. The next line separates what she said from what she meant, that is clarification without deflection. The next line names the exact better phrasing she should have used, that is accountability with receipts. The next line gives the context of her mental state, that is honesty without an excuse. The next line lists the specific people she reached out to, that is proof of intent. The next line acknowledges that the other person had the right to pick her own route, that is grace. And the closing line leaves the door cracked instead of slammed shut, that is hope without pressure. That is a textbook 500-level apology, written under timeline pressure, with the entire culture refreshing the page every 15 seconds, and somehow she still managed to land every single beat in the correct order. That is not luck. That is somebody who has actually been doing the inner work behind the curtain. Most celebrities, faced with that level of public scrutiny, lose at least one of those beats in the panic. Cardi did not lose any of them. And that alone is worth pausing on, because the public has gotten so used to bad celebrity apologies, so used to performative, lawyer-scrubbed, image consultant ghost-written non-apologies, that a real one almost passes by unnoticed because we no longer know what one is supposed to sound like. Now flip the page over to Latto's side of the chessboard, because her writing is doing the exact same kind of surgical work, just in a completely different mode. Look at that lyric again, really break it down line by line. The first move is establishing wealth that predates the gift offer, because if you have already been buying the bag yourself for years, then the bag offer becomes a soft insult instead of a genuine olive branch. The second move is establishing autonomy. You do not get to buy your way into my good graces, my closet is already heavier than your generosity. The third move is escalating from defense to offense, big bank over here, big facts, that is the part of the verse where she stops explaining herself and starts asserting position. The fourth move is the invitation, wishing the other party would step in the booth, which is the rap equivalent of pulling up to the parking lot and saying we can handle this in front of the cameras instead of in the group chat. And the fifth move, calling up Plaque Boy Max, naming her producer by name, that is the architectural detail that tells you this verse was not a freestyle, this verse was sat with, refined, structured, and engineered to hit on multiple frequencies at once. Petty, professional, financial, emotional, all on the same 8 bars. That is craftsmanship. That is somebody using the studio as a courtroom and the microphone as a gavel. And here is what I think the rest of the industry is going to quietly take notes on, even if nobody says it out loud on a podcast. The way Latto handled this is going to set a template for how the next generation of female rappers responds to disrespect. Because the old template, the template the industry was hoping she would follow, was the smile through it, post a heart emoji, sit on a panel together 6 months later, pretend nothing happened, sweep it under the rug, business as usual template. Latto refused. Latto basically looked at that template, set it on fire, and built her own from scratch. The new template goes, you disrespect me, I do not yell at you on Twitter, I do not jump on Instagram live drunk at 2 in the morning, I do not record a diss freestyle in my car the same week. I take my time. I sit with it. I let you reach out. I do not respond on your timeline. I let you twist for as long as I need to. And then, when my own album cycle rolls around, I put the response inside a body of work that is going to outlive the news cycle, so that the disrespect becomes a permanent line on my record and your apology becomes a footnote on yours. That is power. That is patience as a weapon. That is using the album format the way it was originally designed to be used, as a long-form statement of self, not a short-form reaction to the timeline. Now let us talk about the pregnancy detail for a second, because I do not think the timeline is giving this the weight it deserves. Latto sat on that Breakfast Club couch, visibly pregnant, openly talking about heightened emotions, openly talking about being more sensitive right now than she would normally be, and she still chose to address this on her body of work instead of letting the hormones pull her into something messier on the timeline. That is a level of emotional discipline that most people, pregnant or not, would have struggled to maintain. Because every single instinct in a pregnancy state is telling you to either soften everything or sharpen everything, the middle ground is incredibly difficult to hold. Latto held it. She softened her tone in the interview while sharpening her message on the record. That is 2 different vocal registers, played at the same time, on the same week, by the same woman, while she is also building a human inside her body. The level of multitasking that requires, mentally, physically, professionally, is honestly not being respected enough in the conversation around this beef. We talk about Cardi being 8 months pregnant when the leak happened, we should also talk about Latto being pregnant when the response happened. Both of these women are navigating one of the most physically demanding seasons of their lives while also navigating a public emotional negotiation on the world's loudest stage. That deserves at least a moment of acknowledgement, even from people who do not pick a side. And while we are sitting in the nuance, let me push back on one more take that keeps showing up in the comment sections this week, the take that says Latto is being too sensitive, the take that says she is dragging this out too long, the take that says she should have just accepted the bag and moved on. That take, respectfully, comes from people who have never had a real friend turn on them in a room they could not see. Because if you have ever been there, if you have ever found out the hard way that somebody you loved was talking sideways about you to other people, you already know that the apology, even a sincere one, does not undo the original audio reel that gets stuck playing on loop inside your head. The apology can only sit next to the wound, it cannot replace the wound. And anybody telling Latto to just get over it is asking her to lie, to herself and to her audience, in a way that would actually undermine the very honesty her album is built on. Latto is in the middle of a creative season that is rooted in self-assertion, self-ownership, and self-protection. Forcing a public reconciliation in the middle of that season would corrupt the entire artistic statement she is currently making. The verse is the response. The verse is the reconciliation she is capable of right now. And if the industry, the fans, or the timeline cannot accept that, that is the industry, the fans, and the timeline's growth opportunity, not hers. There is also a quieter conversation happening underneath all of this, a conversation about how artists actually use their albums as therapy in real time. Because we have arrived at a place in hip-hop, especially in the women's wing of hip-hop, where the album is no longer just a collection of songs designed to chart, the album has become a journal you can stream. Latto is journaling on Big Mama. Cardi is going to journal on her next project. And the listeners, all of us, get to sit on the other side of that journal entry and try to piece together exactly which life event each line is pointing at. That is a new kind of intimacy between artist and audience, and it is also a new kind of pressure, because once you publish a feeling into a verse, that feeling does not get to evolve quietly anymore. Every interview from that point forward becomes a re-audit of that feeling. Every red carpet question becomes a chance to revise the original line. And both Cardi and Latto are now going to be answering questions about this specific situation for at least the next 12 months, whether they want to or not. So even if the friendship someday repairs itself in private, the public conversation about the repair will keep refreshing for a long, long time. That is the cost of putting your emotional life on wax. The receipts are permanent. The healing is not. And one final detail before we open the floor, because I have been sitting on this thought all morning and I think it matters. The bag itself, the actual offer of the handbag, was never really about a handbag. The bag was a love language Cardi speaks fluently, it was the most Cardi way Cardi knows how to say I am sorry, because in her world, in the Bronx-coded grammar she grew up in, a luxury gift is the loudest apology you can hand somebody without picking up the phone. But Latto does not speak that dialect. Latto's love language is words on a page, eye contact in person, a phone call before the rumor reaches her. So the gift missed because the language missed. That mismatch in how two women define repair is the whole movie in just one line. So now with everything laid out, with every receipt examined, with every angle turned over in the light, the only thing left is your voice. So let me know down in the comments, where do you stand on this? Do you feel like Latto is fully justified in standing exactly where she is standing, holding the line, refusing to perform a forgiveness she does not feel yet, putting the whole thing into a verse and letting the world hear it? Or do you feel like Cardi has earned a real seat at the table by virtue of how publicly, how humbly, how repeatedly she has owned her part, and that Latto should at least crack the door open even a little? And before you answer, before you scroll, before you type, sit with it for a second. Imagine yourself in both chairs. Imagine yourself as the one who said the thing. Imagine yourself as the one who heard about the thing. Which version of you would you want the public to root for? Because that is the honest test of where you really land on this story. Drop your honest take below, tell me what team you are sitting with, tell me what you would have done if it was you. I read every single comment that comes through, the conversation is honestly the best part of this whole channel, and your voice is the reason this channel keeps moving. And if you made it all the way to this point, then you already know what time it is. Tap that like, smash that subscribe, ring that bell, share this video with the friend in your group chat who is going to have the loudest opinion on this entire thing, because every share, every like, every comment, every fresh face that finds this channel through your timeline pushes us one step closer to being able to break stories like this even faster, in even more detail, with even more receipts in hand. We are building something here, and you are the reason it keeps building. If you want to see how the last chapter of this story unfolded, where we broke down the exact moment Cardi B's call leaked, where the audio came from, why it took so long to surface, and what the industry was saying behind the scenes in those first 48 hours, the link is right there waiting for you. Hit it, watch it, get the full picture, and then come right back here so we can keep tracking this thing together as it evolves. Because trust me, this story is not over. The next chapter is already being written. And when it drops, you know exactly where to be. Until then, stay sharp, stay tuned in, stay loyal to your real ones, and I will see you in the next video.